I always believed that silence had its own personality. There was the soft silence at dawn, when the world held its breath before waking. There was the tired silence at night, when the day folded itself away. And then there was the uncomfortable silence, the one that lived between people who used to know each other, but somehow drifted into strangers. That was the silence that sat between my son, Daniel, and me that evening. I had been sitting at his dining table for almost an hour, and although he'd tried to make conversation, everything felt stiff. Manufactured, like we were acting in a play neither of us had rehearsed for. He'd invited me to dinner 2 days earlier with an enthusiasm I hadn't heard from him in years. "Mom, come over," he'd said. "I'll make your favorite." I had felt a small bloom of hope then, a tiny seed inside my tired heart. Maybe, finally, things were getting better. Maybe the years of distance, of him pulling away, of me grieving alone, were coming to an end. So I said yes. Now here we were, sitting across from each other, pretending we'd never let so many years slip between us. Daniel had cooked lemon garlic chicken, sautéed vegetables, and even attempted homemade bread. He'd always been good in the kitchen. His father had taught him that. Sometimes I wondered if cooking reminded him of better times, of childhood laughter, of a father he adored, of a mother who wasn't cracked by grief. I smiled as I ate, even though the tension in my chest made it hard to breathe. "So," he said, slicing his chicken carefully, "how's the house still standing?" I gave a small laugh. "Of course it is. Doesn't feel too big for you." There it was again, that odd, persistent question he'd been asking lately. "No," I said gently, "it feels like home." He nodded but looked away quickly, tapping his fork against the plate. Something restless flickered behind his eyes, something I didn't understand then, something I should have. But hindsight is cruel that way. We moved on to lighter conversation. My garden, his work, the weather. But beneath it all, the space between us pulsed with something unspoken. Then came dessert. He made my favorite, warm apple crumble with cinnamon and brown sugar. I took my first bite just as my phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up. Asterisk, asterisk, Mr. Warren, asterisk, asterisk. My elderly neighbor only called when there was real trouble. My heart tightened. "Sorry," I murmured, picking up the phone. "Let me take this." Daniel waved dismissively. "Go ahead." I answered. "Hello," his voice came through in a shaking whisper. "Evelyn." "Yes, Mr. Warren. Is everything all right?" There was a long pause, and then, "Are you home right now?" His question made the hairs on my arms rise. I glanced around Daniel's warm, cozy dining room, the soft hum of jazz playing in the background, the scent of cinnamon in the air. "No," I said slowly, "I'm having dinner at my son's house." "Why?" Another shaky breath, then quieter, terrified. "Then who is in your house, asterisk, right now, asterisk?" The fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate. My pulse stuttered. My blood turned cold. The room suddenly felt too small. "What do you mean?" I whispered, gripping the phone. "I saw someone," he murmured. "A silhouette, moving across your bedroom window. I thought it was you, but if you're not home..." My heart slammed against my ribs. Before fear could fully spread through me, a sharp, loud sound cut through the air. Daniel's laughter. He threw his head back, laughing so hard he had to hold his stomach. "Oh my God, Mom," he sputtered. "It's probably nothing. He's old. He probably saw a shadow or a tree branch." I couldn't speak. I was still staring at the table, at the reflection of my pale face in the glossy wood. "Mom," Daniel said, still chuckling, "stop worrying." Seriously. But something inside me whispered the truth. This wasn't funny. This wasn't normal. This wasn't nothing. "Daniel," I said stiffly, "get your keys." His laughter stopped instantly. "What? You can't be serious. Get your keys." He stared at me, a flash of irritation crossing his expression, something sharp and unfamiliar, something that shouldn't belong on my son's face. But he grabbed them anyway. We left the warm comfort of his house, stepped into the cold night air, and drove toward my home in uneasy silence. As the streetlights flickered past, my mind replayed Mr. Warren's voice again and again. Then who is in your house right now? The question stuck to my skin like frost. I didn't know it yet, but that night would fracture everything: my safety, my trust, my relationship with my son. By the time the truth revealed itself, the laughter I heard at that dinner table would haunt me more than the shadow in my house ever could. Because the shadow was a stranger, but the laughter belonged to my son, the neighborhood was quiet when we pulled up to my house. Too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes you wonder if the world itself is holding its breath. The porch light was off, the windows dark. Everything looked normal, perfectly normal. Daniel smirked. "See, Mom, nothing to worry about. Mr. Warren's just being dramatic." I didn't answer. Something in me refused to take comfort in normalcy. My gut screamed that tonight my house felt wrong. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The familiar scent of my home old wood, lavender polish, the faint tang of autumn leaves tracked in from the porch was there. But beneath it there was another smell, a faint, sour tang of someone else's presence. The air felt heavier than it should, thicker, almost oppressive. I flicked on the lights. At first glance, the living room looked untouched, but then I saw it, a pillow slightly off the couch, a small stack of books shuffled. My armchair, where I always sat, had been nudged an inch to the left, a blanket folded differently, a shadow in my memory, the way I always leave it, and now it was wrong. I froze. Daniel rolled his eyes. "Mom, really, it's fine. Maybe you just misplaced it when cleaning last week." I shook my head. I didn't. We moved through the house room by room. The kitchen was untouched. The bedroom, everything seemed ordinary at first. But then I noticed the faint smear on the windowsill. Not dirt, not dust. Something wiped clean, but not perfectly. My desk drawers were slightly ajar. Papers were shuffled. Nothing stolen, nothing broken, but everything had been touched. Someone had been in my house. Someone who knew it well enough to not leave obvious signs. Daniel still tried to brush it off. "It's probably just the wind, or maybe you misremembered." I cut him off. "The wind doesn't open drawers, Daniel." He went silent, a flash of something I didn't recognize in his eyes. Irritation. Guilt the moment stretched. Then I heard it, a soft, quick shuffle from the back of the house. I froze again, my heart hammering. Daniel bolted to the back door, but the noise stopped before he reached it. The backyard was empty. I stared at the darkness, my chest tight, hands trembling. Whoever, or whatever, had been in my home had vanished without a trace. We called the police. When the officers arrived, they were polite but skeptical. They dusted for prints. Checked the locks, found nothing, no forced entry, no fingerprints, no sign of the intruder. "It's probably nothing." One of them said. "Sometimes people get nervous. Maybe a neighbor saw a shadow, or maybe it was just your imagination." Daniel nodded eagerly. "See, nothing to worry about, Mom." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them, no, you don't understand. Someone was here, someone who knows this house as well as I do. But all I could do was nod politely. The officers left. Daniel took my shoulders in that patronizing way he always did when I was overreacting. "Mom, you need to calm down. There's nothing here. Let's forget about it." But I couldn't. Over the next few days, the little disturbances continued. Lights I'd left off flickered on. Important documents went missing. Small valuables shifted locations. I smelled cologne I didn't own, faint but unmistakable, lingering like a warning. And then my neighbor mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "They saw your son's car near your house late at night." "Mister?" Warren said, lowering his voice. "I asked Daniel," he snapped. "Are you accusing me of stalking you, Mom? Seriously." I said nothing. I didn't have to. The TRUTHCLDIWFD, it's ERENT way to the SURFICE in his reaction. Fear had grown into something heavier, something like dread. And then came the moment that made everything undeniably clear. I was sitting in the living room one evening, drinking tea, trying to convince myself I was imagining things when I saw it. A shadow moving past the window. Not subtle this time, not fleeting, a figure tall, deliberate. Someone was inside my home. I didn't scream. I didn't run. Instead, I felt a chill settle deep in my bones, and in that moment I knew it. The person who had been in my house that night wasn't a stranger. It was someone who had access, someone who knew when I was away, someone I had trusted. I didn't want to believe it. But my heart knew the truth, and it terrified me more than the shadow ever could, because shadows disappear. But betrayal lingers. I should have recognized the signs earlier, the restless way Daniel avoided eye contact, the flicker of impatience when I asked him simple questions, the subtle bitterness lurking beneath his laughter. But a mother wants to believe in her child, wants to think that love, no matter how strained, is enough to shield them from darkness. I was wrong. The truth didn't arrive in a single moment. It came in fragments, like shards of broken glass cutting deeper as I pieced them together. It started with a bill. A letter slipped under my door that didn't belong. A small, insignificant thing, but it made me pause. Then came a phone call from my bank. Someone had tried to access my accounts multiple times, but the fraud alerts stopped them just in time. And then a neighbor mentioned seeing Daniel's car parked near my house at night. The pieces didn't fit yet, but the edges were jagged and sharp. My stomach churned as I realized that the laughter I heard at my son's house that night, the careless, dismissive laugh, wasn't innocent. It had been triumphant. It had been cruel. I began searching my home more thoroughly than before, determined to find the missing pieces. And I found them. A folder tucked behind a stack of old tax documents, partially hidden, its edges worn from being handled repeatedly. I pulled it out. Inside were contracts, documents, and papers I had never signed, or so I thought. The signatures looked familiar, disturbingly familiar. And then I saw it. A contract for the sale of my house, signed by Daniel, with my name forged at the bottom. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the papers. Everything clicked into place at once. The shadows, the rearranged furniture, the cologne that wasn't mine, the movements Mr. Warren had reported, the laugh at dinner. Daniel had been orchestrating this entire nightmare. He had been scaring me, testing me, watching me tremble in fear, preparing me to leave, or perhaps just preparing the house for sale. And he had laughed through it all. I confronted him that night. I didn't even wait for him to speak. I held up the folder like a weapon. "Daniel," I said, my voice low, cold, "explain this." He froze, and then the mask fell. "I'm in trouble, Mom," he said, voice suddenly small. "I'm drowning in debt. I didn't know what else to do. I needed the money, the house I thought." He trailed off, but the thought was clear. He thought he could manipulate me, break me, drive me out, take what I had built for himself. "I thought you owed me," he said finally, the words spilling out in desperation. "You were always so difficult, so careful. I've struggled alone, Mom, and you weren't there." I felt a wave of nausea, but I held myself steady. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was personal. It was intimate. It cut deeper than anything I had ever experienced. The child I had raised, the boy I had kissed goodnight, the young man I had loved unconditionally had become a stranger. But as I stared at him, something shifted inside me. Not fear, not despair. Resolve. Betrayal had awakened something in me I hadn't known was there. And in that moment I realized, if he thought he could destroy me, he was gravely mistaken. I let him continue to believe he had me under control. I let him see my hurt. I let him believe he had won. Meanwhile, quietly, methodically, I began to plan. I gathered evidence. I documented everything. I traced his steps. I called lawyers, neighbors, even the police discreetly. I learned the art of patience, of waiting for the perfect moment, when his arrogance would become his undoing. I let him think I was broken, but in reality, The seeds of his downfall were already planted. Because Daniel didn't understand one thing: a mother's strength isn't measured by patience or forgiveness. It's measured by her ability to rise when everything has been taken from her, to see clearly when everyone else is blind, and to act when the time is right. And I would act. The shadows in my home, the laughter at dinner, the trembling voice of Mr. Warren, they were all warning signs I should have heeded. Now I would turn them into weapons, because the truth had been revealed, and the laughter, it would haunt him for the rest of his life. The night Daniel confessed, the truth hit me like a blade, but I did not fall. I walked through the house afterward, quietly, methodically, as if I were examining every inch for the next steps. The furniture, the walls, even the air seemed to pulse with anticipation. This house, my sanctuary, had been violated, but I would take it back, not with anger, but with precision. Revenge, I realized, was not about hasty confrontation. It was a game of patience, of intelligence, of waiting until the opponent could not see what was coming. And Daniel was blind to the storm I was becoming. #****, the plan ****, I started small, cameras discreetly installed in corners of the house. Records of unusual activity meticulously logged. Digital copies of every bank statement, every document, every contract Daniel had touched. Notes, dates, inconsistencies. I created a web of proof so tight that not a single lie could escape. I reached out to lawyers. Quietly, carefully, I built a fortress of legal and financial oversight around myself. I spoke to police officers privately, giving them details of the night Mr. Warren called, the repeated disturbances, the forged documents. I did not cry. I did not plead. I spoke with calm precision, the kind of voice that carries the weight of certainty. And Daniel, he continued to believe he had the upper hand. He bragged, he schemed, he laughed, assuming his mother was powerless. I let him, #***, the first strike ****, it started with his investors. They had been breathing down his neck for months, demanding returns, threatening lawsuits. I sent discreet tips, proofs of his misdeeds, evidence that the house he tried to manipulate was not his to touch. The tips reached the right people, quietly, carefully. Within weeks, the investors were questioning him, doubting him, turning their attention elsewhere. Daniel's panic was subtle at first. I watched from the periphery, feigning ignorance, letting him spiral. The stress began to show in his face, in his hands, in the sharpness of his voice. #***, the second strike *** next. I let the police catch the man Daniel had hired, the intruder who had terrified me that night. Daniel thought this man was invisible, a shadow in the night who would do his bidding silently. But the night he returned to my house, the trap was set. Police waited. Evidence had been logged. Cameras captured everything. The man was caught red-handed. Daniel thought he could run. He thought he could hide. He couldn't. ##*, the sweetest revenge ***. By the time Daniel realized I had moved against him, it was too late. He had lost the investors, the contracts, his credibility. The man he hired was behind bars. The forged documents were now evidence against him. The courtroom was silent as I walked in. Daniel avoided my gaze, his bravado gone. He tried to plead, to explain, to charm. None of it worked. The judge asked if I wanted to mitigate the charges. I smiled quietly. No, I said. The silence that followed was deafening. I had no need to shout, no need to scream. The quiet sufficed. Daniel's downfall was complete. ##*, reclaiming my life *** after the court. I returned to my home, walked through every room, and let the light of morning touch the walls. The house belonged to me again, not just physically, but emotionally. I rebuilt what had been broken, repaired what had been shaken. I planted new flowers in the garden, rearranged furniture to my liking, and allowed the air to breathe freely once more. I learned something essential through all of this. Betrayal can wound, but it cannot destroy. It cannot destroy the strength of a mother who refuses to be broken. **** epilogue, who is in my house now. ***, I sometimes think about that first phone call. Who is in your house right now? The question that had haunted me, terrified me, made me doubt myself. Now I know the answer. Me, only me. I am the one who protects this house. I am the one who restores it. I am the one who thrives inside it, and I know something else now. No betrayal, no matter how intimate, no matter how deep, can ever take that away. The shadow that once frightened me has vanished. The laughter that once mocked me has turned silent. The house, my home, is finally mine again. And Daniel, he will always remember the quiet, inevitable justice of a mother who refused to be broken.